Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to talk a lot about the Godzilla 7.3 gas engine in this Ford F-250 Super Duty. And we're just kind of how it compares to my 05 Silverado. So just to give you a full background here, first of all, right, for those who don't know, my daily for the last 8 years has been a 2005 1500 series Silverado extended cab short bed. 342 rear end gears, 5.3 that I converted to a 6-liter LQ9. It had a built transmission in it, just the 4L60, but it shifted nice and everything, and a couple little mods here and there, just like headers and tune, and nothing too crazy, but a couple little small power adders, if you will, stuff like that. So it was a pretty good running truck before the 6.0, a really good running truck after the 6.0. The reason I got into this F-250 is because I was killing that poor vehicle. I put my motorcycle in the bed, which you can see back there if you look real close, and I would tow my camper as well. I was right at the rear axle rating, a little over payload technically. I did that for years, and it was okay, but just a lot of random little things happened, and I just kind of got to the realization that I was destroying the driveline of this vehicle, given the loading, how I was loading it up and what I was doing with it. It's very, very, very hard on a vehicle towing on the interstate down south in the middle of summer. All that heat, it just heat soaks everything. Things you don't even think about, transfer cases, rear ends, the U-joints in the drive shaft, they just take so much abuse from that kind of operation at basically full capacity of the truck. And it had 248,000 miles. It'd been around the block. That's a lot of freaking miles for anything, much less a vehicle you're hooking up to a trailer and towing 700 plus miles in a day with. That being said, I had a lot of successful tows too. I did Nashville all the way back home to Albany, New York in one shot. It's like almost 1,000 miles. Did that one time, no problems. Right after I did the 6.0, towed pretty good actually, all things considered. I had an add a leaf in it, so the suspension was pretty good. It was really a good truck for what it was. The problem is, I just was a little bit overdoing it. So I got looking for vehicles. A modern half-ton, 6.5 foot bed crew cab max tow is what I was looking for. And if you look at that vehicle and how it's spec'd, that gives you, generally speaking, about 11 to 12,000 pounds towing and about 1,800 to 2,000 pounds payload. Now, you can argue this in the comments. I firmly believe that any half-ton towing 11 to 13,000 pounds, unless it's a low air volume wind sail, if you will, load like a dump trailer or something, probably not the best idea because it's going to throw the truck around a little bit, but you do you, and if you got a good weight distribution hitch set up, it very well may work for you. However, I wanted to spec a truck to about 11 to 13,000 pounds in order to tow about 6,000 to 8,000 pounds. And I figured that was a good buffer zone, right? That gave me plenty of extra capacity and stuff like that. Now, with the motorcycle in the bed of the truck, that's a serious amount of payload. If you add some people and the dog and some cargo, it's very easy to get even to a 2,000 pound payload rating of a half ton. And I knew that. And I was okay with that because I was going to be able to be within rated specs, close, but within rated payload specifications. And the max tow packages have a heavier duty rear axle, so they have a pretty good rear axle weight rating. And I just said to myself, it's probably going to do what I need it to do pretty well. I'm going to get better unloaded fuel economy, probably the same, if not a touch better, towing fuel economy. It's just a little lighter duty truck in general, and that's all I need, right? So I started looking for that. Well, evidently, the max tow packages have been on like back orders and whatnot for a long time. They're unobtainium. You just can't find the things. And I was willing to buy a one-way plane ticket and drive one home. Like, that wasn't the issue. But you go Auto Trader or something and search the whole country, new or used. There's just so few of them. It's like, to get the options you want, very, very hard. And then you combine that with the 6.5 foot bed crew cab. It's practically, you gotta order it. If you want to get a specific truck, you gotta order it. And the problem was, just money-wise, I needed it to be like an RST trim and not like an LTZ or a high country. I just couldn't afford it, right? So because of that, if I was willing to go to an LTZ or High Country, I might have been able to pick one up. But in an RST, max tow, not a lot. And crew cab 6.5 foot bed, again, not a lot of them. So all these things were going through my mind. And then I got to a point where I was also thinking about it with the Chevys. By the way, this is the same story for Ford and Ram. Very much so. I really didn't want a Ram because the bed, a short bed Ram, or a 6.5 foot bed Ram, is actually a little shorter than a Chevy or a Ford. It's like, instead of being 6'6", it's like 6'3". And I know that might seem like it's 3 inches, who cares? But for my motorcycle in the bed, you gotta kick the angle, you gotta angle it even more. And if I ever wanted to haul a little bit bigger motorcycle, because I have a Harley Sportster, if I ever wanted to haul like a Dyna or a new Softail platform, it might not fit in the bed at all, and the tailgate has to be down, and then if you're towing a camper, it's just a whole nightmare, right? So it had to be a Ford or a Chevy. Honestly, I'm still not the EcoBoosts are an awesome engine. I just like my old dumb V8s. So then it kind of put me right back into a Chevy, right? Which I was fine with, 6.2, 10-speed. That's the other thing. 6.2, 10-speed is a hard combo to find with all these other specs I had. So I was looking for this unobtainium truck, so I had to go back to the drawing board. So I'm like, okay, well, what about a 2500? Because the other thing that a 2500 gets you, right, is a bigger gas tank. And for all this long distance traveling I do, 24-gallon Chevy gas tank sucks. Ram and Ford have 30-something gallon tanks, which is pretty good for half ton, especially with the mileage they get. So that was fine. But then Chevy only has a 24-gallon tank, which is useless to me. It's a shame that they just don't put a bigger tank, give you the option for it. But anyway, so I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of trying to do big boy truck things here with a half ton. Let me look at a big boy truck. Let me look at a 2500. So I did. And I did a lot of research on the 6.6 gas, 10-speed Chevys and the 7.3 gas, 10-speed Fords. And so both 2500, F250, 2500. I drove both of them. Mind you, I've been a Chevy guy the last 8 years. I got a Chevy Camaro. Kind of wanted the Chevy just out of, not brand loyalty even, just like, I don't know. I've always had Chevy since I've been 19 years old. I switched to Chevy, and I've always had Chevy, right? I actually had a Ford before that, but just like it was what it was, right? It's just like you have an iPhone, you go buy another iPhone kind of thing. You don't necessarily look for an Android, Not that you hate the other one, you just don't necessarily do it. So, with all that being said, I said to myself, okay, let me cross shop these. It's a really big purchase, right? I'm going to be spending $50,000, $60,000. Let me cross shop more. And the 6.6 gas Chevys, 2500s, really nice trucks. I like the interior. The new 2024 LT interior and up is beautiful, really nice interior. It's a little more screenage than I personally need or care about, but it's cool, I guess. It's fine. Ford, kind of similar story. They've all gotten really big screens and everything else, which is fine, but just kind of is a waste on me. An 8-inch screen is plenty for what I'm trying to do. Put my navigation up and that kind of thing. So I drove the 6.8 gas Ford in an XL. And I was impressed. I just only drove the 6.8 because I figured if I like the 6.8, I'm definitely going to like the 7.3. And the 6.8 was awesome. It had good power and everything. I was like, wow, this is actually an impressive little vehicle here. I'm going to really add this to the list of what I'm looking at. And I don't think I would have gotten the 6.8. I definitely went on the 7.3 just because. Then I drove the 6.6 Chevy and it drove well, but I guess what surprised me was, despite the solid front axle Ford, this has always been my thoughts on Ford Super Duties. I've driven the older ones, right? Early 2000s, mid 2000s, 2010s, and they've always, in my opinion, they've always handled like crap. The steering has never been precise on them at all. And like going around like exit ramps and high speed corners, like, entrance ramp to a highway, the thing would like dance all over the road. And I don't know, I never liked it. They rode like freaking dump trucks because of the solid front end. I always liked the way the Chevys handled the road, the 2500s and stuff. So I drove the 250 Ford and I was like, holy crap, like this thing drives nice. Like this is a properly good handling vehicle. And then I hit a lot of bumps with it, and I found a dealership right next to each other, and I drove the Chevy and the Ford in the same loop. And honest to God, maybe I'm going crazy. I think the Ford had a little bit, not much, a little bit smoother ride than the Chevy on all these bumps. And I'm like, okay, this Ford is now in the running. This thing really impressed me, right? So then I got looking, and I go on the website. I'm like building trucks that would be kind of what I would want. Then looking at dealer inventory. Now, being a 250, I'm not looking for some specific, hyper-specific cabs configuration. I mean, a crew cab 6'10" bed is like the easiest thing to find ever. So now suddenly I'm going from finding no results to having kind of the pick of the litter. And I'm like, okay, this is good. However, the price was really starting to creep up. The Chevys were MSRPs, which on 2500 series trucks, you're basically paying MSRP right now, unfortunately. They don't have any discounts right now. And I needed a new truck. I wasn't waiting. So I'm looking. It's, I'm kind of trying to stay around 60. By the time I get some of the options I really wanted, I'm like pushing 64, 65. And I'm like, oh man, that's going to be set with New York State tax is high, right? So it's going to be like 70 grand with tax. I'm like, $70,000 for a freaking vehicle. And you watch these reviews, these guys online reviewing different trucks and stuff, and they're just casually, oh, this truck's so awesome, and at the end of the video they'll just slide in there, yeah, it's MSRP $85,000. And it's like, okay, so listen, if you got a ton of money, awesome, go buy an $85,000 truck. I'm 20, almost 29 years old. I got, I don't have a house yet. I have other toys, right? I got my motorcycle, got my car, if you watch the channel, and all these other things. I'm not spending, whether I technically can get a loan for it or not, is irrelevant to me. I'm not spending $85,000 on a freaking pickup truck that's going to depreciate, and be worth 20 grand by the time I'm done using it. And, I'm going to just blow through $60,000 or whatever. So I'm like, okay, all right, that's not going to happen. So then I'm looking at the 7.3 Fords, and their MSRPs are pushing 70 grand for the options I want. And I'm looking at LTs and Chevys and XLT Fords. So I found a couple XLT Fords for like $66,000, $67,000 MSRPs. Let's say 65 to 67. But, and they all had a couple other things I maybe didn't want, but you just had to get because it was the truck on the dealer lot. Again, I could have ordered one, whatever. Okay, fine. So I was a little bit deflated, and I'm like, what can I do to get a vehicle that I'm comfortable with the payment on and get what I need capability-wise? So, and I got other vehicles, right? This isn't my only vehicle. I can also keep the 05, and I put a lot of good work into it. As long as I'm not towing long distance with the dang thing, I can drive it. It's a good usable vehicle, right? It's not dead. It's not so trashed. It just is getting beat up by what I'm doing with it, right? If I just drive it like it's meant to be driven, it's going to be fine. So I can offset some of the miles in the new truck if I want to keep it. So I said, you know what? I really wasn't going to go use, but I'm like, let me just look at use. Let me just see what's out there. So I found this 2022 7.3 XLT F250, and it's rapid red, which is like a maroon. And I love my dark reds. I've just always liked dark red, and it is very hard to find a vehicle, new or used, in red nowadays for whatever reason. So when I saw this thing, I would online, and my jaw dropped. It had a little bit more miles than I wanted, but Ford certified warranty. The price was honestly not great, I wouldn't say, but fair. It was like $52,000, which I think I think $52,000 would be a more fair price if it were like 15, 20,000 miles. But there's not a lot of these things out there used. So I did like a 200-mile search radius around my parents' house in North Carolina, and there was like 5 of them that were in my budget, and gas 7.3 XLT trim, or give or take, with low miles. So there's just not a lot. So you're gonna pay what you're gonna pay. The MSRP on this truck was like 58 and change. So it's kind of crazy that in 2 model years, right, almost 3 model years, like really two model years old, and it only lost like $6,000 off MSRP. You could call me a sucker for buying it for that. If you look at the prices out there, it's just what it costs. I mean, a new one is now, for this trim that I got, a new one's $67,000, and that's why this truck is worth $52,000. Not because its own MSRP was super high, right? Its MSRP is $58,000, but the new version of it's like freaking $5,000 to $8,000 more. So it just keeps the price of the used ones up, and that's what's happening, right? Is these MSRPs are growing so fast, the used vehicles aren't depreciating the way they used to in some sense, unless you put miles on them, right? So anyway, I mean, it costs what it costs. You can go online and, you know, put in the comments a link to something that's a way better deal. And hey, if you find something good on you, go buy it, and I'm happy for you. But this is the best I found that I could do. I found another one in a similar area with half the mileage for a little bit more money, but it had been smoked in, it had some damage. It was just kind of a, you know, not as good of a truck, right? This was a June 2022 build, so it's a very late 2022. It's really almost a 2023, so that's kind of nice, you know, something anyway, considering you paid a little bit more than you wanted. And I don't think the guy ever towed it anyway. It doesn't have a fifth wheel prep package, so he definitely didn't tow a fifth wheel. Trailer hitch had not a scratch on it, so I think he just, for whatever reason, it was a Texas truck, got brought to North Carolina, but he basically just bought a big ass truck and pounded a bunch of probably highway miles on it, considering that he did them all in the span of, year and a half or whatever, right? And that was kind of it. So hopefully it gives me a good service life, and I don't have any problems with it. Who knows? The good thing is I have a powertrain warranty to 100K. So that was the other thing. You're paying a little bit more money for it, but you're paying a relatively high price, even though it's a used vehicle. But I'm almost getting a better warranty in a sense, because the new vehicle powertrain is going to run out at 60,000 miles. Well, you're more likely to have a powertrain issue between 60 and 100,000 miles, not 0 and 60,000 miles, right? So from that perspective, it's really actually kind of almost better that I bought a used one. Or maybe not better, but it's a benefit that you don't get on a new vehicle unless you buy an extended warranty, which they're going to charge you, $2,000-3,000 for, and it is what it is. So I wound up spending well under 60 with tags, which really put me well within my original budget, which was just awesome. I was so happy about that. And I had to get the Ford because Chevy doesn't have the 10-speed in 2020, 2023, and Ford's had it since 2020. So if I wanted that 10-speed transmission, I literally had to get a Ford. So that's kind of what drove that decision. And not for nothing, but I mean, having a couple extra horsepower and torque over the 6.6, it doesn't hurt. I think that they perform pretty similarly from what I can tell online. And people seem to say that the 6.6 gas tows very similarly well to the 10-speed Fords, 7.3 Ford. So I don't know from personal experience, but that's kind of what the internet claims. I think they're probably both really, really good trucks. I was impressed by both of them in a way that I haven't been impressed with 2500s in the past. I've driven a lot of like 6.0, 6-speed, 6.0, 4-speeds, even some of the older Ford stuff. And they're fine. They get the job done. They're workhorses. But they're just big, slow, lumbering 2500 series trucks. And the thing I like about this is it's quick on its feet. It's got a good amount of power, even if you're just driving it empty. You don't feel like slow and sluggish. You hook a trailer to it, it's got pretty darn good power. It doesn't feel slow and sluggish. And it just drives nice. It's quiet, it's smooth, it's comfortable. The 10-speed transmission, I think, shifts pretty well. It's a little gear hunty at times, whatever. I think this 10-speed shifts cleaner and hunts for gears less than the 6-speeds did. I really do. I was never a huge fan of the 6-speed transmissions. I never actually owned one because that's kind of why I was stuck in the past with my 4-speed. I was just like, I don't know. I never really liked the 6-speed, so it never gave me a motivation to upgrade. I knew the 4-speed had a lot of limitations, of course, being a 4-speed, but it just satisfied me in a way that the 6-speeds didn't. And this 10-speed fixes a lot of that stuff for me, despite having like a ton of gears. I just feel like the computer knows what it's doing better. It's less confused all the time. And maybe that's some confirmation bias because I own this and I don't own a 6-speed, so I haven't driven them maybe as much. But I have, right? I've towed with the 6-speed 6.0. I've driven them for probably low thousands of miles, just my parents' vehicles, like my friends. I mean, I've driven a lot of the, half-ton and 3/4-ton Ford Chevy. Like, I've driven a lot of them. 8-speed Rams. I like the 8-speed in the Ram. I've driven those. Like, I have a good experience with a lot of these vehicles. And this 10-speed just, I don't know. Who knows how long they'll last? They're still relatively new. But performance-wise, it just blows me out of the water. It makes this thing feel like a CVT, but not in like bad CVT ways, like in a good way. It feels like an electric vehicle almost. You just kind of put your foot in it, and it does what it needs to do, and it makes you go places. And like, that's kind of cool. When you're just cruising around, driving 700 miles with a camper, I love that. Combine that with a 34-gallon stock tank. Do I wish it was 10, 15 gallons bigger? You bet your ass I do. Is 34 a hell of a lot better than the 24 that came in the Chevy half-ton? Absolutely, right? So now I'm getting, even towing 250 plus miles of range. I can live with that. Will I add an auxiliary tank like I did in my old truck? I probably will, but like, this is okay. So just a lot of benefits. The other crazy thing is, and I'll do a whole mile per gallon video on this truck, but I'm getting, as we speak, with my motorcycle in the bed, I'm getting 15.6, and I'm going all of 80 miles an hour on the interstate. Pretty flat. My truck, I've done this exact trip with the exact motorcycle and exact cargo, and we'll compare it to be sure, but I mean, on 89 octane with that 6-liter, because I can't really run 87 with it, I was getting 13 to 14 mpg. That's with 342 rear end, so gear ratio was not the issue there. I had plenty of highway gear, and it would sit in overdrive. It just, a lot less efficient drivetrain overall. The 4-speed, just the 6.0 is an old school technology. I love it. I love LSs. I'll always love LSs. It's a freaking 30-year-old engine design almost. I mean, it came out in the late 90s when they really designed the LS motor. I mean, they're awesome. They're legendary. Nothing but good things to say about them. But it's 2024, and this, this 7.3 Godzilla really uses a lot of the best elements of that LS engine design. Ford arguably copied it in a lot of ways, but it incorporates some modern technology just enough to kind of bump the fuel economy up, right? The transmission, the lean, it has a whole lean burn thing where you can actually have like a non-stoichiometric ratio burn to get a little bit more mile per gallon when you're not fully in the throttle. So it's just like a lot of little things Ford did. And I'm sure Chevy did on the 6.6 gas as well. They seem to be getting really good mileage also. I mean, the technology is really helpful. And these 2500s on both brands don't have the auto start stop. They don't have active fuel management. They don't have the active grille shutters. There's a lot of components that would yield them even better mileage that they chose to leave out because these are more like commercial work vehicles. And I overall like that because I'm still kind of old school. And as much as I would love to see 20 miles per gallon out of this truck on the highway, I'd rather see empty 16, 17 and not have any of that other BS to deal with than see 18, 19 and have all that other stuff. I just personally, to me, it's worth the trade-off. I get why people want to see 20 plus in their pickup. Like, if you're not towing as much as I am or quite as much weight or as often, I think a half ton makes a lot of sense. I'm just in this weird spot where I'm like not really in 3/4 ton territory, but I'm like also kind of not quite in half ton territory. And if you're stuck between the two, I feel like it's in your best bet to just upsize a little bit and deal with the slightly added cost of running costs and everything else. Now, looking at that from the other angle, diesel versus gas, the crazy thing is, and I have a friend who runs a dumpster company, and he has a 7.3 gas F600 Ford Super Duty that has a rollback dumpster setup on it, hook lift. He does 10, 15, 20 yard dumpsters. And so he'll gross empty, right? Empty can on his truck is 13,000 pounds gross. That's what I was 13,120 when I towed a trailer down here a week ago. I went to a cat scale. So he's grossing 13,000. I grossed 13,000 with this 250. And let me tell you what, if you're grossing 13,000 with a F250 of 20 years ago, it'll do it just fine. well within the rating. It's going to be okay. But, like, you're going to feel it. 4-speed transmission, not nearly as much power. I mean, the V10 was pretty solid, don't get me wrong. But not as much power as this, a lot less gears. You're going to know you're towing it. And I'll tell you what, that freaking camper behind this thing was... I mean, obviously you knew it was there, and it shifted, 7% grades, you needed some RPM. But it just towed so nice. The stability, the braking, these modern 2500s, they just absolutely crush the miles towing. And I can confidently say if you have a 7, 8, 9, 10,000 pound fifth wheel camper, or a 11, 12, 13,000 pound, lower profile trailer like multi-car hauler or something like that, I really think this gas engine with this chassis is a respectable option to avoid the cost of diesel and the DEF and everything else if you so choose. Like, I think it's a viable option, and it's not something that you would be regretting purchasing. I think if you're coming from a 10-speed Power Stroke or Duramax, I mean, it's not going to be your diesel, right? Like, you're going to probably be a little bit annoyed by how much it needs to shift in comparison, because it is a gas engine and it's got to rev up a little bit. If you're trying to max this thing right out, so mine's rated for 14.7. The new ones with 373s are rated for like 15 something, and then for 430s it's like 16, 17. If you're trying to max it out and you're towing cross country, I think you're gonna really rather have the diesel and just put up with the dieselisms. But for a truck that'll get pretty good mileage on an 87 octane and tow well on 87 octane, I'm passing a diesel station right now. 418 for diesel. It's like 340, 350 for gas in this state. I'm in Pennsylvania right now. It's kind of high gas prices, but you're spending 50 cents to $1 less on fuel per gallon. You can get quite a bit worse gas mileage, and it's going to break even or be cheaper. And then you don't have the maintenance costs of the diesel engine and the DEF and the DPF and all that stuff, right? People have gone on about this, but it's it makes sense though. It's also running on 87 instead of 89, like the LQ9. The LQ9 really needed 91 technically, but I put 89 in it, and it would ping like a little bit, not much, just a little bit ping here and there. And if I put 87 in it, I just wasn't comfortable towing with it. So that's a huge cost savings just running the lower octane fuel alone. And I'm sure this truck would get even better mileage if I did experiment with the premium, because it has the compression ratio where I can't imagine it wouldn't benefit from at least 89. And you might get enough mile per gallon that it actually makes it worth it. So I might even experiment with that. But for now, I haven't. But it's just all these things. So a round trip for me from upstate New York to North Carolina where my parents live, towing the camper, it's about $200 less, I calculated, in fuel, taking this bigger, heavier duty truck than my older, lighter duty half ton. I mean, if you do that, I don't do that trip once a month, but let's just say for argument's sake you did. $200 a month. That would cover, a good chunk of your payment in just fuel. Like, when people say that fuel economy doesn't matter, fuel economy matters. It matters. Unless you are just obscenely wealthy, or it's a paid, a work vehicle where you're getting paid to go on a job, and so they're covering the fuel and your income, that you're making from that job. If it's for hobby use, especially, the fuel economy really starts to matter. And it still matters for a business too, don't get me wrong, this is an expense. But you can cover that expense up by charging a customer a little bit more, potentially, something like that, right? But you're not going to cover up an expense when it's just coming out of your paycheck. So, we all work hard for our money. Most of us do. And I just want to get the best value I can, and to not have breakdowns and to have a vehicle that's actually saving me money when I tow with it and drive it empty is like an absolute win-win for me. And, a half ton would have saved even more, gotten even better mileage, but would it have lasted as long? Grossing 13,000 pounds, would that half ton last, say, 200,000 miles? Like this truck, let's just theoretically say it will. Or would it have only lasted 120, 130,000 miles? In which case that fuel cost is now potentially offset by the fact you had to upgrade the vehicle again. So there's so many different ways to look at it. Hey, maybe that half ton would outlast this thing. I mean, you just don't know. But if I had to venture a guess, all else being equal, which in this case it is, because I'm towing the same trailer with the same, truck A or truck B, the 2500 should last longer. I was, a little unsure getting into a 2500. I still don't love how giant they are to park and stuff like that. But I have other vehicles. I still have the half ton. I have my car. I have my motorcycle. Luckily, I'm not driving this daily every single day, right? Like, I'm actually able to drive other vehicles when I choose. So I don't really have to take this thing downtown into a city most of the time. And for the rare occasion that I have to take it, it is what it is. You jam it into a spot, you move on with life. It's got a backup camera. It's got the parking sensors and all that kind of stuff, right? So you can make it work. Yeah, I'm really hoping that I can provide a unique perspective for people being going from a half ton to a 3/4 ton and going from a older half ton to a modern 3/4 ton. It's a pretty big jump. It's a pretty big difference. It's a perspective that a lot of people probably don't necessarily have, because a lot of people are either going to upgrade to a much newer truck that's still a half ton, or they're going to upgrade to a modern half ton to a modern 3/4 ton, for example. So they just don't have the perspective I have. So we'll see if that maybe that adds some value to people, and maybe what I have to say helps somebody else make a decision on upgrading an older vehicle depending on what they're doing. So yeah. All that being said, as always, thanks for watching. God bless America, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.